So I want you to picture the typical timeline of a modern Western funeral. Just think about that process for a second. There is this overwhelming expectation of, well, suspended reality. You're essentially pressing a giant pause button on life.
Right. Yeah, everything just stops.
Exactly. Someone passes away, and immediately you enter this extended, highly managed period. I mean, we are talking days, sometimes up to 2 weeks, of refrigeration, embalming, coordinating schedules, waiting for relatives to fly in, booking a venue, arranging the catering. It's a lot.
It really is. It creates this sort of logistical waiting room.
Yeah.
The physical reality of death is temporarily hidden away in cold storage, while the living focus entirely on event planning.
Yeah.
The person is gone, but their physical vessel is kept in this strange state of artificial preservation.
Which is just, I mean, it's an agonizing state of suspended animation. The body is just, well, waiting.
Yeah.
And we tell ourselves we need that time, right?
Absolutely. We think it's necessary.
We think we need time to process the shock, to organize the memorial, to gradually say goodbye on our own preferred schedule. We essentially sanitize the process to cushion the blow. But then you step into the world of Orthodox Hindu tradition, and that pause button is completely shattered.
Oh, it's obliterated.
Yeah. You are looking at a timeline that is startlingly immediate, almost aggressively so to an outsider. We are talking about the funeral, the final, irreversible rites, often happening within 24 hours of death. Sometimes, if the timing aligns, before the next sunrise or sunset.
It is the absolute antithesis of the slow, managed, hidden Western goodbye. I mean, it is a rapid, intense, and unfiltered confrontation with impermanence. There is no hiding the body. There's no delaying the inevitable.
Which is why today's deep dive is exploring an incredible stack of sources detailing exactly this practice. It's called Antyesti, the final Hindu sacrifice. And our mission today is to really dig into these texts. We're pulling from ancient scriptures like the Garuda Purana, modern theological rulings by bodies like the Kashi Vidjat Parishad, and even real-world sociological case studies of modern families navigating these ancient rules.
Yeah, and it's so important to look past what might just seem like a, purely practical response to living in a hot climate.
Right, because before refrigeration, you obviously had to move quickly.
Exactly. But the texts reveal something much, much deeper. We're going to uncover the profound metaphysical, psychological, and cosmic mechanics driving this rapid timeline.
Because this tradition isn't just a set of disposal instructions, is it?
Not at all. What these sources detail is essentially a masterclass in confronting death, navigating the incredibly complex mathematical laws of karma, and really understanding the intricate journey of the soul. It's a highly structured, dynamic process where every single hour counts, and every action has a metaphysical reaction.
So whether you have experienced profound grief yourself or you are simply fascinated by how different cultures handle the ultimate human mystery of death, well, understanding this framework offers a radically different perspective on how we say goodbye. It really forces you to question almost everything the modern world assumes about mourning.
It does. It completely flips the script.
It really does. So to start making sense of this 24-hour rush, we have to start with the core metaphysical premise. Because if you don't understand how this ancient tradition views the anatomy of the soul, the immediate rush to the fire just looks like pure chaos.
Yeah, without the context, it just looks frantic. But the rush is actually highly calculated. To grasp it, we have to talk about the Jiva.
The Jiva. Okay, let's unpack that.
Right, so the Jiva is the individual soul, the living entity experiencing reality. But the texts emphasize that the Jiva is not just a floating, naked spark of consciousness. It is encased in different layers or bodies. While you are alive, you occupy the Sthula Sharira, which is the gross physical body.
Like the flesh, the blood, the bone, the nervous system.
Exactly, the physical hardware. But nested inside that physical shell is the Sukshma Sharira, which is the subtle body.
And the subtle body is the one carrying all the heavy luggage, right? It isn't made of physical matter, but it holds everything that makes you, well, you, in a functional sense.
Precisely. The subtle body carries the mind, the intellect, the ego. And incredibly importantly, it carries the samskaras.
The karmic imprints.
Yeah, these are the deep subconscious karmic imprints left by everything you have ever experienced, thought, or done in your life. Think of samskaras like grooves worn into a vinyl record. Every single action deepens a groove.
Okay, that makes sense.
So when physical death occurs, the heart stops beating, the breath ceases, the physical body fundamentally breaks down and ceases to function. But, and this is the crucial metaphysical anchor of the entire tradition, that subtle body Carrying all those grooves and memories, it does not immediately disconnect from the physical realm.
It's still tethered.
Strongly tethered. Physical death doesn't sever the soul from earthly existence in a neat, split-second cut. The physical body has been the soul's primary anchor to its identity for decades. As long as that physical anchor exists in an intact, recognizable state, the soul experiences a state that tradition calls moha.
And moha translates to this confused, desperate, almost delusional attachment, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. Delusional is the right word. The subtle body remembers the taste of coffee. It remembers the feeling of hugging its children. It remembers its name and status.
It's a bewildered clinging. The soul is thrust out of its physical vehicle, but it just doesn't want to let go because that physical body is the only reference point it's known.
Right. It is frantically trying to hold on to a life that has technically already ended. It hovers, it observes, it tries to interact with a world it no longer has the gross physical tools to touch.
I really love the analogy we were looking at earlier. Think about it like an old house. The physical body is a house you've lived in your entire life. You know every creaky floorboard, every light switch, and suddenly you've just been evicted. That's the moment of death.
You are locked out.
Yeah, you're locked out, but the house is still standing right there, looking exactly as you left it. So what are you going to do? You're going to keep hanging around the front porch. You're going to try to peer through the windows. You are going to jiggle the doorknob.
Because you can't believe it's not yours anymore.
Right. If the new authorities don't demolish the house, you, the former owner, will keep trying to live in it. You will be entirely unable to move on to your new destination.
Or another way to visualize it is like an expired passport. The physical document looks totally valid, your picture is still in it, the gold foil is still shiny, but the governing authority has canceled it in their system.
Well, that's a good one, too.
Yeah, you can't travel with it anymore, but because you still have it in your pocket, you keep handing it to the border guards, hoping against hope they'll let you through.
Those visual analogies capture the exact distress of the Jiva described in the texts. As long as the house stands, as long as the passport is in your pocket, you refuse to accept the reality of the transition. And this is the exact psychological state. The rapid execution of the funeral rites is designed to cure. The intervention is daha samskara, the fire ritual or cremation.
Fire. Agni. And the texts are very specific about the nature of this fire.
Because in this context, fire is not viewed merely as a destructive chemical reaction, is it?
No, not at all. Agni is considered a divine purifier and a cosmic messenger. By consuming the physical vehicle, Agni definitively breaks the anchor. The quick, total destruction of the physical shell forces the subtle body to accept the stark reality of its transition. It provides a decisive, irreversible metaphysical rupture.
It essentially burns down the house, so the soul has absolutely no choice but to leave the neighborhood. It can't jiggle the doorknob anymore because the door is ash.
That forced release of the soul's grip on its earthly identity is what allows the journey through the transitional realms to actually begin. Without the fire, the journey stalls.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this brings up a massive misconception that the sources spend a lot of time addressing. From an outside perspective, we often think of cremation as the final period at the end of the sentence. The body burns, turns to ash, and poof, the soul instantly jumps into a new baby somewhere, or instantly stands before a judge in the clouds in some split-second heavenly courtroom.
Right, the instant judgment idea.
Exactly. But the theological text describes something entirely different. The fire forces the soul to move on, but it is moving into a highly structured, remarkably bureaucratic intermediate zone. We'd really have to dispel this myth of instant, split-second cosmic judgment.
Yet, traditional Hindu eschatology presents a dynamic, prolonged timeline. The physical funeral on day one is not the end of the process. It is merely the opening sequence of a grueling 13-day judicial and transitional period.
Wow, 13 days. So the fire goes out, the physical body is gone, the subtle body is now untethered, and the sources call the soul in this specific post-fire state a praeta, right?
Yes, a preta. It's a wandering spirit, a deeply liminal soul. It's caught between worlds, no longer part of the living and not yet integrated into the ancestral realm or moved on to its next incarnation. During these initial days following the cremation, the soul is believed to occupy a very specific subtle form known as the yatana sharira.
Yatana sharira.
Which translates roughly to the body of suffering or the body of consequence. It is a temporary, subtle vehicle, but it is one entirely capable of experiencing the sensory and emotional weight of its karmic record.
Meaning, even without physical nerves, it can feel the consequences of its past actions. It feels the echoes of the harm it caused and the good it did.
Exactly. The Yatana Sharira is highly sensitive to the karmic review process, and this leads into a massive cosmic bureaucracy. Judgment in this framework is not a singular deity pointing to a permanent heaven or a permanent hell. It is an automated, immutable, objective calculation of karmic balances. This cosmic court is overseen by Yama, the deity of justice, and the lord of death.
And Yama doesn't work alone. He has an assistant, or, well, more accurately, a cosmic chief accountant named Chitragupta.
Right, Chitragupta is the keeper of records. He maintains something called the Agrawan,
The ultimate ledger.
the unalterable, perfectly objective record of every action, every thought, every intent, and every impulse you have ever generated across your lifetime. Every single energetic transaction is logged in the Agrawan.
Okay, let me pause and push back on the mechanics here, because reviewing the texts, a massive paradox jumps right off the page for me. We have this intense, urgent, unyielding mandate. The physical funeral must happen within 24 hours. The family has to scramble, skip sleep, and get the fire started immediately to prevent the soul from lingering. But then, the cosmic audit, this judgment process with Yama and Chitragupta, takes 13 days to process.
Yeah, 13 days.
If the universe is in such a desperate rush to sever the tie on day one, why does the cosmic justice system take almost 2 weeks to process the paperwork? Why the sudden slowdown?
What's fascinating here is that the connection between the two timelines is actually causal. The quick fire is the trigger that initiates the 13-day audit. They are inextricably linked.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, delaying the physical funeral keeps the soul trapped in that state of moha, that confused attachment near its earthly home. It's lingering in the driveway of the burned-down house. And while the soul is lingering in the earthly realm, the audit in Yama's court cannot begin.
Ah, you can't start the trial if the defendant refuses to leave their house and enter the courtroom. The judge is just sitting there waiting.
Exactly. The final fire ritual acts as the formal submission of the soul to the cosmic court. The faster the body is committed to Agni, the sooner the formal 13-day period of evaluation begins. The universe isn't slowing down. The 13 days are required for the intricate process of karmic review and the gradual transition of the soul's energy. Finally, on the 13th day, a capstone ritual called Sapindakarana takes place.
Saptindakarana.
Yes. This is the moment when the Preta, that wandering liminal spirit, is formally merged with the Pitras, the ancestors, in a transitional realm called Pitruloka.
So the 13th day is the absolute deadline. That's when the trajectory of the soul is locked in.
At that precise juncture, the ultimate path is determined and enacted. Depending on the calculations in the Agrawan, that path could be immediate rebirth into another earthly form, passage to higher subtle realms for temporary reward, passage to lower realms for temporary purification, or the ultimate goal of all Vedic philosophy, Moksha.
Total liberation from the cycle of rebirth entirely.
Exactly. Total liberation.
Understanding this 13-day cosmic timeline completely reframes the physical act of cremation itself. Because in the modern West, cremation is viewed entirely through a lens of utility. Bluntly, it is a hygienic method of disposal. It's a practical way to handle remains when cemetery space is low. But in this Vedic framework, it is an active, required, deeply sacred ritual offering. It's not disposal, it is a sacrifice.
Yes, and that word is key. In Vedic philosophy, human life is structured from birth to death around sacrifices, known as yajnas. The texts view existence as a constant cycle of giving and receiving energy. You offer food to the digestive fire inside your stomach just by eating. You offer devotion to the hearth fire in your home. You make energetic offerings to society through your daily duties. The funeral rite itself, Antyesti, literally translates from Sanskrit to the last sacrifice.
The ultimate offering, the final time you give something back to the universe.
When a person dies, their body is no longer a living temple for the soul. It becomes the final material offering, the havas, to be placed onto the altar. And the pyre itself is that altar. The cremation ground, the smashana, is not a morbid wasteland. It is a highly sacred space, constructed specifically for this final ritual of return.
And the fire, Agni, acts as the intermediary, taking the offering back to the source. The sources place a huge emphasis on the return of the Panchamarakhuta, right? The 5 great elements that make up the physical universe.
Earth to earth, water to water, fire to fire, air to air, and space to space. Agni consumes the physical elements, rapidly breaking down the complex biological machine and returning its raw materials to their cosmic origins. Simultaneously, the fire purifies the subtle energy, carrying the cleansed subtle body upward toward its karmic review with Yama.
Which explains another vital reason for the extreme rush. If you delay the funeral unnecessarily, say you put the body in a mortuary refrigerator for 10 days while you wait for a convenient weekend to hold the service, the offering is fundamentally decaying. It is losing its ritual purity. The texts demand that you offer the vessel back to the universe while it is still in its pristine, immediate post-life state.
Exactly. It is about a clean, respectful, and decisive closing of a life chapter. A decaying offering is considered ritually impure and energetically heavy. The vessel must be returned swiftly.
Let's shift our focus to the living for a minute. Because while the soul is dealing with Yama, Chitragupta, and the Agrawan, the family left behind is going through profound, shattering psychological trauma. And the sociological sources in our stack point out that this 24-hour rule isn't just about cosmic physics. It has massive, brilliant psychological imperatives for human grief. Think back to that Western state of suspended animation we talked about at the beginning.
The agonizing administrative wait.
Right. You are managing logistics, you are on the phone with caterers, you are picking up relatives from the airport, you are choosing floral arrangements, all while the uncremated body of your mother or father is sitting in a cold room across town. You are essentially living in a state of active denial because the physical reality of the death hasn't been finalized in front of your eyes.
And being busy feels productive. Right? It mimics the feeling of having control. But you aren't actually processing the loss. You are simply planning a high-stakes event. The emotional reckoning is delayed.
Contrast that with the raw, almost jarring immediacy of the Hindu tradition. There is zero time for denial. Within hours of a loved one taking their last breath, the family is actively, physically involved in the reality of death. The texts detail how the family bathes the body themselves, the snana. They don't hand it off to a stranger. They wrap it in a simple, unstitched white cloth. They lay it on a plain wooden litter. And then the immediate family physically carries the body directly to the cremation ground.
That physical, tactile involvement is absolutely key to the psychology of this tradition. In many Western traditions, professionals handle the body from the moment of death. Embalmers, funeral directors, makeup artists. The family is shielded from the raw physical truth of death. The body is presented later, looking as if it is merely asleep.
Yeah, the illusion of sleep.
Right. But in a Hindu tradition, the eldest son, or the chief mourner, is the one who steps up and personally lights the pyre. Or, in a modern urban setting, they are the one who physically presses the button to start the electric crematorium.
The psychological weight of that is immense. Think about how denial prolongs grief. We've all seen it or experienced it ourselves. Months later, you still catch yourself thinking they're going to walk through the front door. But this traditional system forcefully, almost violently, cuts through that denial. You are actively participating in the physical dissolution of your loved one. You are watching the body turn to elemental ash in real time. You hear the crackle of the fire. You feel the heat.
It kickstarts the psychological mourning process instantly. The grief is concentrated. It is raw. It is brutal in its undeniable reality, but it leaves absolutely no room for the mind to invent fictions. And crucially, that intense raw moment is immediately followed and supported by the community over the structured 13-day Shraddha period.
It forces you to process the loss systematically, rather than carrying this extended, ambiguous dread for weeks before the funeral even happens. To make this intense psychological process concrete, let's look at two specific narratives from the sources. We have a modern real-world case study, and we have an ancient allegory from the scriptures. Let's start with the modern one. The sociological study details the case of a man named Ramesh in Lenasia, a prominent suburb in Johannesburg.
This case perfectly illustrates the timeline in action within a modern diaspora community. Ramesh is an elderly patriarch who passes away suddenly from a massive heart attack at exactly 3:00 a.m. on a Tuesday morning.
3 a.m. Total shock to the family. No prolonged illness, just sudden absence. Now, in a typical Western secular setting, the family wakes up in a panic, the paramedics arrive and pronounce it, and then, well, the waiting begins. They call a funeral parlor. The body is zipped into a bag and taken away to cold storage. The family might schedule a viewing for the upcoming weekend. They spend the next 4 days sitting in the living room making administrative phone calls, feeling entirely disconnected from the physical reality of what just happened.
But in Ramesh's family, the traditional Orthodox Hindu protocol immediately overrides everything else. By 5 a.m., just 2 hours after his heart stopped, local community elders and ritual helpers are already arriving at the home.
There's no emotional freeze, no time to sit on the couch and stare at the wall in shock. The protocol demands action.
The sons and close relatives immediately begin preparing the body. They wash their father with sanctified water, honoring his physical form one last time. They wrap him in the Chitragupta, the traditional unstitched white cloth. They apply sandalwood paste. They chant specific mantras. And by 1:00 p.m. that very same afternoon, Ramesh's body is placed on a simple wooden bier and transported to the local municipal crematorium.
Less than 12 hours from his last breath, the funeral is happening.
And there, standing in the crematorium, his eldest son presses the button for the Daha Samskara. He witnesses the physical form of his father dissolve. The anchor is broken.
The study notes that by sunset on that very same Tuesday, the family returns home. They wash their feet to purify themselves, they sit on simple floor mats, and they begin the 13-day Shra period. The physical container, the body, is completely gone. Because of that rapid disposal, the entire focus of the household shifts instantly. They aren't worrying about how a decaying body will look at a future viewing. Their focus is entirely on the spiritual journey of Ramesh's soul through Yama's court and their own collective grief.
The physical anchor is gone, so the emotional and spiritual work can begin immediately. The space is cleared for pure mourning.
Compare that highly structured, grounded, real-world experience with the second narrative from our sources. This is the ancient allegory found in the Garuda Purana. This text is a massive foundational scripture structured as a sprawling conversation between Lord Vishnu, the preserver of the universe, and his divine eagle-like carrier, Garuda. And it describes what this whole rapid process looks like from the perspective of the departed soul.
The imagery in the Garuda Purana is incredibly vivid and honestly almost haunting. The text describes a soul that has just exited its physical body. It's hovering right there in the room, standing alongside its former physical frame, watching its grieving relatives weep.
The text describes the soul as entirely bewildered. It is shouting, trying to talk to its children, telling them it's right there, but of course, its subtle voice produces no sound waves in the physical atmosphere. It tries to sit in its favorite chair. It tries to touch its most prized possessions, but its subtle hands just pass uselessly through solid physical objects.
The soul is experiencing the ultimate manifestation of moha, that intense, disorienting desire to re-enter its former body. It doesn't understand the physics of its new reality. It doesn't understand why it can't just slide back into its chest, start the heart beating, and wake up.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Reading this text, there is this incredible cinematic turning point. The physical body is brought to the cremation pyre, the fire is lit. The Garuda Purana says the soul initially panics. It watches its former home, its familiar body, being consumed by actual flames. But as the Agni cleanses the wood and melts the flesh, a sudden, profound shift happens. The tether violently snaps.
The house finally burns down. The soul can no longer deny the eviction.
The soul looks down at the pile of white ashes and has this massive, clarifying realization. Its earthly identity, its name, its job title, its bank accounts, all its petty physical grievances, it was all just a temporary costume. It was just one short act in a multi-lifetime cosmic play.
Released from the delusion of that physical anchor, the soul finally turns its gaze away from the earthly home. It stops trying to shout at its children, it stops trying to sit in its chair, and it turns upward, beginning its trek toward the court of Yama. And as it begins that scary journey, it is supported and nourished by the energy of the daily ritual offerings being made by its family down below.
It is amazing how the beautiful, terrifying poetry of the Garuda Purana maps perfectly onto the psychological necessity of the fast funeral we saw with Ramesh. The texts provide a spiritual rationale for a psychological need. But, well, as poetic and spiritually cohesive as that strict 24-hour rule sounds in a textbook, the modern sources point out that implementing it in the 21st century creates massive, massive friction. We have to dive into the modern tensions here. Let's look at the first major tension tearing at diaspora communities: ancient spiritual speed versus global modern logistics.
This is a profound, often heartbreaking pain point for the global Hindu diaspora today. In the ancient agrarian world, where these rules were codified, families lived in the same village for generations. When someone died, everyone who mattered was already there. Today, a parent might be living in India, and they have one child working in finance in London, another doing medical research in New York, and a sibling in Australia.
Right. A parent passes away in Mumbai, and it takes at least 24 to 36 hours just to book a flight, get to the airport, and travel across the globe. If you strictly follow the 24-hour Orthodox rule, the children miss the funeral. They miss the chance to say a final goodbye to the physical face of their parent. They miss performing those critical final rites like lighting the pyre. The sources detail how that causes a massive emotional trauma.
This geographical reality creates a sharp, sometimes bitter divide within families and religious councils. On one hand, you have the strict Orthodox view. This view maintains that the spiritual journey of the deceased soul, the Jiva, takes absolute, uncompromising precedence over the emotional convenience, travel schedules, or psychological closure of the living relatives.
The priority is the soul's transition. You don't mess with the soul's timeline just because a flight from Heathrow is delayed.
From the Orthodox perspective, holding a corpse in a refrigerated mortuary for 3 to 5 days just so an adult child can fly in from London is tantamount to holding the soul hostage in the earthly realm. You are intentionally keeping it in that bewildered, distressed state of moha we just described from the Garuda Purana.
You are forcing the soul to watch its family cry for 5 days while it tries to touch objects it can't feel. You are artificially extending its agony.
The ancient texts explicitly state that the physical body, once dead, begins to attract negative subtle energies. Refrigeration arrests the physical decay, but metaphysically, the soul remains agonizingly tethered to a cold, dead shell. It is considered deeply spiritually harmful to the deceased.
But then our sources introduce the modern pragmatic view. And this view pushes back hard, arguing that funerals, fundamentally, are tools designed for the living. The dead are gone on their journey. The living have to carry the heavy, crushing weight of the loss for the rest of their natural lives.
The pragmatic argument acknowledges the ancient texts, but emphasizes human psychology. Denying a child or a spouse the opportunity to see their loved one's body one last time, or to perform the critical kapal kriya, the lighting of the pyre and the final rites, well, it can leave lifelong psychological scars. It breeds unresolved grief, family resentment, and tremendous guilt.
The guilt of not being there when it mattered most.
So modern practitioners and local priests are constantly negotiating this tension. Can chemical preservation or cold refrigeration be spiritually neutralized? Can you perform specific purification rituals, like punyahavachanam, before the delayed cremation to offset the spiritual harm of the delay? It is a constant, fraught negotiation between immutable ancient metaphysics and modern global geography.
That logistical debate naturally bleeds right into a technological debate, because even if you do get everyone together quickly, the actual mechanics of how you cremate a body have changed dramatically. We have the traditional wood pyres versus modern electric or gas crematoriums.
And the sensory experiential differences between the two are staggering. A traditional riverbank pyre, like the famous ones at the Manikarnika Ghat in Varanasi, takes 3 to 5 hours for complete reduction of a human body to ash. The family stays present the entire time. They smell the smoke, they hear the wood crack and pop, they watch the slow, methodical, elemental dissolution.
It is incredibly visceral. You are outdoors, surrounded by nature, watching the elements literally return to the elements, the sky, the water, the fire. But an electric crematorium, that takes maybe 60 to 90 minutes. The body is placed on a tray, it goes into a high-temperature steel chamber, and a heavy metal door slides shut. The process is completely hidden from view. You just wait in a sterile room until someone hands you an urn.
It is mechanized, it is sterilized, it is hidden, and it is very fast. And this shift sparked a massive, intense debate among ritual scholars and traditional pandits. Does the accelerated speed and the hidden mechanized nature of high-tech cremation alter the spiritual efficacy of the Antyesti? If Agni is a divine purifying messenger, does an electric coil or a natural gas jet count as Agni? Does it purify the soul the way a sacred wood fire built with mango wood and ghee does?
That is a fascinating technical question. You are essentially asking if the gods recognize a gas jet. How did the religious authorities handle that?
Well, the major traditional assemblies, like the Kashi Vidvat Parishad, which is a highly respected, deeply orthodox council of scholars in Varanasi, analyzed this question deeply. And their consensus was incredibly practical and surprisingly progressive. They determined that the physical fuel source of the heat is secondary.
Wait, really? So the wood itself isn't the magic ingredient. It isn't a chemical spell.
Exactly. The scholars ruled that what matters most is the intent of the living, the precise recitation of the Vedic mantras, the samskara mantras that guide the soul, and the rapid total destruction of the physical vessel. The goal is to break the anchor. In fact, many theologians and modern environmentalists increasingly favor electric cremations over wood pyres. They drastically reduce deforestation, they minimize massive carbon emissions, and, crucially, they accomplish the core metaphysical task, severing the soul's physical anchor, even faster than traditional wood fires.
The house burns down quicker, so the soul is forced to move on quicker. That is a brilliant, flexible adaptation of ancient theology to modern technology. But, digging into these adaptations brings us to the deepest, or honestly, the most complex theological tension in the entire stack of sources, the debate between automated karma versus ritual intervention. And I have to be honest, reading the text, this feels like a massive contradiction that the tradition just politely ignores. Let's look at the first side. Strict karmic determinism.
This is the heavyweight philosophical bedrock of Hindu jurisprudence, found in the Upanishads and the Vedanta. It holds that karma is an absolute, objective, immutable law of cause and effect. It is literal physics for the soul. The universe keeps a perfect ledger. Your trajectory after death is strictly determined by a complex mathematical balance. You have your sanchita karma, the vast accumulated warehouse of all past actions from countless lifetimes. And you have your prarabdha karma, the specific palette of actions allocated to be experienced in your most recent lifetime.
So the math is the math. The ledger balances perfectly.
From this strict philosophical perspective, no amount of rapid cremation, no amount of family crying, and no amount of elaborate ritual offerings can alter the objective verdict of Yama's court. The speed of the funeral simply starts the clock on the audit process. It doesn't buy you a better rebirth. It doesn't lighten your sentence. You, and you alone, are entirely responsible for your own cosmic ledger.
Okay, but I am not letting you off the hook with that because that strict logic completely contradicts the actual practices described in the rest of the texts. We just spent all this time talking about the ritual intercession view, the deeply held popular belief that what the family does after you die actually matters to your soul's fate. The sources say that the rituals performed by the living, specifically the speed of the cremation and the daily offerings, actively alleviate the soul's suffering in the subtle realms. Some traditions even explicitly claim these family rituals can literally pay off or smooth out the deceased's transitional karmic debts.
You are hitting on the exact friction point. Popular Puranic tradition asserts that the family's actions serve as a vital, energetic life raft for the soul as it crosses the terrifying transitional realms.
But this is a direct contradiction. Is my soul strictly responsible for its own fate based on the universal laws of physics? Or does my post-mortem destiny depend on whether my son or daughter performs a time-sensitive ritual correctly? If karma is a universal law, my kid getting stuck in London traffic shouldn't affect my soul's trajectory. If my family messes up the ritual, do I get a worse reincarnation? How do the scholars actually reconcile this?
It is an incredible tension, and to be perfectly honest, the sources reveal that it has never been fully, cleanly resolved in a way that satisfies both the strict philosopher and the grieving villager. It reflects two competing fundamental human needs. We have an intellectual need for a perfectly just, objective cosmic law where everyone gets exactly what they deserve. But we also have a desperate emotional need for the living to feel they can actively help their departed loved ones. The rituals give the grieving family agency. They feel they are actively guiding and protecting the soul, not just helplessly watching it leave to face a cold, automated cosmic judge.
The contradiction exists because human grief demands it. And this need for the living to feel useful leads us to the intricate ritual mechanics the family performs. These aren't just vague thoughts and prayers. The texts outline precise, highly specific physical actions the family must execute over the 13 days. Let's zoom in on the pinda dane you mentioned earlier.
The pinda are ritual rice balls. During the 10 to 13 days of mourning, the family offers these daily. They are made of cooked white rice mixed with black sesame seeds, honey, and sacred water.
But the sources make clear these aren't just symbolic plates of food for a hungry ghost. The texts detail this fascinating, almost architectural anatomy of the subtle body being built day by day through these offerings.
The belief is that these daily pinda offerings contain subtle energy that sequentially constructs a new vehicle for the departed soul to use in the transitional realm. It is highly specific, almost like 3D printing a subtle body. Day 1's offering builds the head. Why the head? To restore the soul's subtle sensory perception. Day 2 builds the neck and shoulders. Day 3 builds the heart, the seat of emotion. By day 10, the offerings build the digestive capacity and the subtle organs, allowing the soul to fully absorb the energy of the final offerings.
So the logic here is that without this daily precise intervention from the family, the soul remains a headless, formless spirit. It literally needs the living family to build it a new metaphorical body so it can physically make the journey to Yama's court.
That is the traditional Puranic belief. It highlights a profound, inescapable interdependence between the living and the dead. The deceased parents gave you your physical body when you were born. Now, in return, you must help build their subtle body for their final journey. It is the ultimate reciprocation of the gift of form.
The symmetry of that is beautiful, but then the texts detail rituals that are much more shocking, especially to a Western sensibility. The one that completely threw me when reading the sources was the call Kriya.
The skull-breaking rite. This is often the most startling, visually intense aspect of the Antyesti for outside observers. During, or near the very end of the cremation process, when the pyre is fully blazing, the chief mourner takes a long, thick bamboo pole. They reach into the fire and physically strike the skull of the deceased to crack it open.
I mean, in a Western framework, striking the skull of your deceased parent with a stick sounds almost like a desecration. It sounds violent. But looking at the texts, there is a highly specific, almost mechanical yogic reason they do this, involving the body's energy. Can you explain the yogic physics here?
It is entirely metaphysical, rooted in ancient yogic anatomy. According to this system, the human body has various energy channels, or nadis. The central channel, the sushumna, runs up the spine to the crown of the head. The crown of the head is the Brahmarandra, the highest energy center, the crown chakra. When a person dies, their prana, the subtle life force, exits the body.
And the exit point matters immensely.
Exactly. If the prana exits through lower physical orifices, like the mouth or lower excretory organs, it implies the soul was still attached to base, earthly, worldly desires. But escaping through the crown chakra signifies the highest spiritual elevation, moving toward liberation, or moksha. Cracking the skull with the bamboo pole is a deliberate, forceful physical action to ensure that the prana has a clear physical pathway to escape upward through this highest center.
It is a final, forceful act of assistance to direct the soul's energy toward its highest possible spiritual potential. It isn't violence, it's a cosmic release valve. And the physical rituals don't end when the fire goes out and the skull is broken. The sources mention the asti sanchana, the gathering of the bones.
Cremation, especially on a traditional wood pyre, doesn't completely reduce human bones to fine ash. Usually on the 3rd or 10th day following the cremation, the family members return to the cremation grounds. They meticulously sift through the cold ashes and collect the unburned bone fragments, typically teeth, large joint bones, and pieces of the skull.
These fragments are called the asti.
The asti are carefully gathered and washed in milk and holy water to purify them. Then they're taken on a journey to be immersed in a sacred river, like the Ganges or the ocean. This symbolizes the absolute final return of the densest, most stubborn mineral elements of the human body to the cosmic waters. The cycle of the physical elements is completely closed.
Returning what was borrowed from the earth back to the earth. Now, while all of this intense ritual action is happening, the fire, the skull breaking, the daily rice balls, the bone gathering, the family is simultaneously undergoing a very specific, rigid lifestyle protocol called sutak. This is a 13-day period of quarantine.
Sutak is defined in the text as a state of ritual impurity. For 10 to 13 days following a death, the immediate blood relatives enter this state. The rules are strict. They do not visit temples, they don't attend weddings or festive gatherings, they don't cook intricate meals for guests, and they don't even perform their regular daily worship rituals, their puja, at their home altar.
When you first read the phrase ritual impurity in a Western context, it sounds like a punishment. It sounds like the texts are saying you are unclean or tainted by the foulness of death. But wait, I was looking at the actual rules. They can't cook for guests. They can't go to social events. At first glance, that sounds like they are being shunned. But actually, if I just lost a parent, not having to host nosy neighbors, not having to put on a brave face at a cousin's wedding, not having to fulfill social obligations, that sounds like an incredible relief. Is this actually an enforced psychological quarantine masquerading as a religious rule?
You've hit the nail on the head. Far from being a punishment, this ancient isolation protocol serves as a brilliantly designed, mandatory, culturally enforced quarantine for intense emotional grieving. It gives the family divine permission to step completely out of normal society.
It acts as an invisible shield. It tells the community, this family is off limits. Do not ask them to host you. Do not ask them to celebrate. Leave them alone to grieve. They are relieved of all social and religious burdens so they can focus entirely on processing the trauma of the loss.
It creates a safe, structured psychological container for grief. And, importantly, it has an expiration date. Once the 13 days are over, there are purification rituals, a community feeding, and a formal, structured return to daily life. You aren't expected to grieve intensely in isolation forever. The tradition provides a clear beginning, a messy middle, and a definitive end to the acute mourning phase, pushing the family back into the stream of life.
That is an incredibly healthy psychological framework. But before we move to the final eschatological debates in the texts, there is a fascinating caveat that jumped out from the sources. All these intense rules we just spent an hour discussing, the purifying fire, the skull breaking, the 24-hour rush to break attachment, well, they don't actually apply to everyone. There are strict exemptions. Who doesn't get cremated?
Tradition dictates that certain specific individuals are buried, which is called Bhu Samadhi, or they're immersed entirely in sacred rivers, which is known as Jala Samadhi. This exemplis primarily includes children under the age of 5, pregnant women, and fully realized ascetics, the sannyasis or yogis.
If the fire is the ultimate cosmic requirement for releasing the soul, why do these specific groups bypass Agni? I can maybe deduce the yogi part. If the fire is strictly necessary as a violent shock to break worldly attachment, to cure moha, wouldn't a monk who already spent their entire life meditating and detaching themselves from worldly desires simply not need the shock?
Your deduction is exactly in line with the theological text.
Yeah.
It all comes back to the core logic of the fire. The fire is medicine for a specific spiritual sickness, attachment. The fully realized yogis represent the pinnacle of spiritual evolution. Through a lifetime of intense spiritual practice, meditation, and tapas or austerity, they have already burned away their material attachments while they were still breathing. They've already fully realized that the body is not the self. So when their physical body dies, their soul simply departs smoothly. There is no frantic clinging to the house. Therefore, the purifying fire of Agni is redundant. They are buried in a seated meditative pose.
The fire is medicine and they don't have the sickness. What about children under 5?
Children are viewed through a similar lens of purity, but from the opposite end of the spectrum. They haven't lived long enough in the material world to develop complex karmic desires, deep material attachments, or significant ego. Their subtle bodies naturally and easily detach from the physical form without needing the violent severing of the fire.
We have covered so much intricate ground here, from yogic physics to diaspora logistics. But all these rules, these exceptions, the modern logistical tensions, they all lead us into some very profound, unresolved cosmic mysteries found in the texts. The biggest unresolved issue seems to be the actual timeline of reincarnation itself. What happens after the 13th day?
The sources reveal two competing theories of rebirth in the texts, and they present very different visions of the soul's ultimate journey. We have the rapid reincarnation theory, and we have the extended liminal journey.
Let's break those down.
The rapid reincarnation theory holds that the soul reincarnates almost immediately upon the body's destruction, or very shortly after the 13-day audit period concludes. This model is often applied to highly evolved souls who have no lingering attachments to hold them back, or conversely to deeply degraded souls who pass instantly into lower forms to burn off heavy negative karma. For them, the rapid funeral simply accelerates an instantaneous jump to the next physical vessel.
But then you have the extended liminal journey, which sounds much more like the Tibetan Bardo state.
This model suggests that the vast majority of normal human souls, those of us with a messy, complicated mix of good and bad karma, enter a complex, subtle journey across various realms of light and shadow. And the text suggests this journey can last up to a full earthly year before a final womb is chosen for the next rebirth.
A whole year of wandering through subtle realms. So in this model, the quick 24-hour funeral doesn't result in quick reincarnation at all. It just ensures the soul actually starts the year-long road trip instead of becoming a trapped earthbound entity, a ghost stuck hovering around its former living room.
It forcefully pushes you out the door, but the road trip to the next life still takes a year to complete.
So what does this all mean? Looking at all these incredible complexities, the rigid determinism of karma versus the desperate family rituals, the ancient 24-hour rule versus modern travel logistics, let's look at one final, very modern tension. Say there is a legal issue. A sudden death occurs, and a police autopsy is required, or forensic investigations force a mandatory 2-week delay before the state will release the body back to the family. We discussed the orthodox fear that the soul is suffering in a state of moha during this time. But does the cosmic justice system actually account for modern human logistics? Is that soul genuinely, objectively harmed by a forensic delay that is totally out of their control?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at what these traditions are ultimately trying to achieve for humanity. Whether you view this as a precise, literal cosmic science of subtle energy, where forensic delays cause objective spiritual harm to the soul, or you view it as a profound, culturally constructed psychological framework designed to force humans to confront impermanence, the concept of anicca, its overarching value, is undeniable.
The ultimate value is in how it shapes the behavior and the mindset of the living.
Even if a mandatory forensic delay occurs, the core teaching of the tradition remains intact. The body is temporary. The rituals, whether they are performed in 24 hours under ideal conditions or 14 days later due to unavoidable tragic circumstances, serve to align the living with dharma, with righteous duty. The framework forces us to act with profound intention, to honor the transition of life, and to deeply recognize that we cannot control the universe.
It strips away our comfortable illusions of permanence. Let's briefly recap this incredible journey we've covered today. We started with the Jiva, the soul, wrapped tightly in its subtle body, desperately clinging to its expired physical passport. We saw how Agni, the sacred fire, acts as the ultimate cosmic medicine to sever that delusional attachment.
We navigated the automated cosmic court of Yama and Chitragupta, where every single intent is logged in the unalterable Agron. We explored how the grieving family actively builds a subtle vehicle for the soul using the 10 days of precise Pindadan offerings.
We dove into the yogic physics of the Kapal Kriya, guiding the prana through the crown chakra. And we grappled with the intense modern tensions, the children stranded in London traffic, the shift from roaring riverbank woodpires to hidden electric steel chambers, and the deep, unresolved theological debate between rigid karmic law and the desperate power of a family's final sacrifice. The ultimate lesson of the fast departure tradition is blindingly clear. The physical body is an instrument. It is a temporary vessel. It is not the true self. Honoring the dead doesn't mean clinging to their physical shell and preserving it artificially. It means releasing them with love, fire, and absolute clarity.
And by releasing them, you are forced to step back into your own life with that exact same clarity.
And that brings us right back to where we started today. We talked at the very beginning about the modern Western tradition of the long pause, the weeks of chemical embalming, the quiet carpeted mortuaries, the highly sanitized waiting. We assume we are doing the deceased a profound favor by preserving them, by dressing them up, by making them look peacefully asleep in a box, by holding on to their physical form for as long as humanly possible. But reading these ancient texts, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. If the Hindu tradition is right, if holding on to a physical body essentially traps a soul between worlds, bewildered, distressed, and tethered to its old house, we have to ask ourselves something deeply uncomfortable. Does our modern sanitized Western approach to death, where we hide bodies away in cold storage and delay our mourning for weeks to plan a convenient party, actually end up turning us, the living, into the ghosts? Are we the ones left liminally tethered, frozen in denial, unable to transition back into the land of the living, simply because we refuse to watch the anchor burn?
A powerful question. When we refuse to let the fire do its work, we are the ones who stay haunted.
Thank you so much for joining us on this extensive deep dive. Keep questioning your assumptions, keep exploring new perspectives, and we will see you next time.